All right, welcome to Halitics. Let me get Arlen on the screen and me too. There we go. Welcome to Halitics on this Tuesday. It's an Arlen Tuesday. Arlen, how are you today?
I'm doing pretty well. The weather looks good outside. Everything's fine except for the state of our country.
Yeah, things are really, really rough. And also the state of Halitics is kind of rough right now. And before we get into our topics, our stories, including we're going to go to Gaza and spend a little more time than I do sometimes. We always start there, but I'm going to spend a little more time because the news is really, really breaking there and it's terrible. I just want to start with just a kind of some regrets about what's happened in Halitics lately. And I banned somebody who had been a long time contributor, and I'm hoping I can unban them. Nothing's ever permanent. Also suspended another contributor because the commentary that they were providing, my sense of not just one example, but several, were designed to not to have a dialogue, not to have a conversation, but to tear down the discussion. And that wasn't always the case. And it's very upsetting to me. And it's also especially upsetting, Arlen, because I take a significant amount of the blame for this. In response to the outpouring of grief for Charlie Kirk after he was shot, posted something, I'm not going to repeat what I posted, that was very insensitive. And I'm not going to, try to defend what I wrote. I'm not going to, nor am I going to, beat myself up over it. But it made me less credible. It really reduced me in the eyes of some of our, or maybe all of our more conservative viewers and posters. And I think that's unfortunate because what I really want to have here more than anything else is a dialogue where we move forward. That said, I'm just one more point here. I did acknowledge I did something I regretted. I deleted my offending post, but I didn't pretend I didn't make it. And I trying to be responsive to and acknowledge the concerns of everybody who posts at Halitics. But that concern includes making sure it's a safe space. You can post without fear of being attacked personally, without fear of having your motives impugned, with some exceptions, which I'll get into. And that I was not seeing happen. So I had to make some decisions. I'm sorry about that. That's the way it goes.
Yeah. Well, your posts are just a reflection of what's going on in the entire country. People are just not tolerant. People are very angry. People are into blaming other people. It's just not a good time. And I hope somehow, people learn to get along a lot better, because if this continues, we're never going to have a democracy back.
Yeah, it's really, really a bad state where we are right now. And I think what I also find very troubling about this is it helps the people that we most dislike and of whom we most disapprove. So, the folks who are the big Charlie Kirk supporters, including those who've been posting at Halitics, what frustrates me about that, and this is a somewhat, I guess, self-righteous attitude, or it's condescending, or whatever term you want to use, and I can understand why it would put people off. I believe that Charlie Kirk was harmful. I think he hurt them. He didn't just hurt the progressive movement or individuals who are progressive. I think he hurt our nation in very tangible ways, most specifically by his, avid support for Israel, which, really didn't wane. At the end, there were some murmurs that he had pulled back a little bit, and that maybe he was targeted for that. It seems unlikely, but I guess it's possible. But that to me was a very significant negative. And also, he was a divisive person. And I've said this over and over again, he pit people against each other who I think have many similar economic interests. I'm not denying that there are demagogues on the left or leftist or, baiters on the left who do the same thing. And I call them out as well. But Kirk had power, he had influence, and I think he used it to try to keep people who should be uniting to demand better from the elites, instead to keep them separated so the elites could continue to run roughshod.
Yeah, he was. He went a little too. He went far in a lot of things. He said some very hateful and bigoted things during his life and during his career doing this kind of work. But they're starting to manipulate his record and trying to make him into some kind of a god or something that never, was totally perfect in everything he did. And that's just not the case. He probably has some good qualities. He's certainly charismatic, and he may inspire people to get more involved in politics. That's all good, but it comes with a lot of very angry, negative posts also.
So just want to say hey to Splash Kenberger in the chat, saying that he's getting a nice break to watch us. I don't know what you did, Splash Kenberger, that crossed the line. I wasn't aware of anything, but if there was, I forgive you. Since you asked for my forgiveness, I'm not sure what is. Arlen, you wrote about Kirk at thebigpicturereport.com, which is where you do blog. And so we'll, I don't know why I don't have the Big Picture Report in your description. I should have it, right? I should have your website listed. I will try to put that up. I don't know why. I thought I used to have it. Maybe I didn't. But we'll talk more about Kirk when we get to Arlen's stories. The first one we'll discuss is what he wrote, an actually Arlen authored piece, which I think is quite measured. I don't think it's particularly, there's not a lot of hate even. There's not hate, I should say, which is, different than I guess I expressed, although I still take, whatever that I expressed and pulled back. But before we get there, just real quick, Gaza death toll. I don't want to say real quick. We're going to spend some time in Gaza. Death toll near 65,000. Hunger deaths climbed to 428. 3 more people died of malnutrition, including a child. They starved. It's just so bad, Arlen. And that's really my biggest, the biggest reason I went after Kirk is because I had watched videos of him defending Israel, condemning Hamas, denying that there were even a Palestinian people. And that really boiled me over. As a Jew who, whose people were genocided in the 1900s, 1940s, I can't tolerate that.
Yeah, I printed some of the things he said about Jews too that were very, unkind and kind of attacking them on some issues. And, I didn't think that was so good, but I didn't know about, his position on the war in Gaza.
Yeah, he had always defended Israel from the for really probably over a decade. And Max Blumenthal from The Gray Zone writes quite a bit about that and how at the very end it appeared he might be turning slightly against Israel or not quite as fully supportive of the Netanyahu regime. And there's speculation again that could have been a factor, could have been the reason that he was targeted. I will say, based on what we know today about who the shooter is alleged to have been and their motives, that seems extremely unlikely. And Max acknowledges he doesn't have any reason. He has no evidence that Israel was involved. There we have our totals, just about 65,000 now. I saw a number of 650,000. Trump and Netanyahu alone now over 12,400. And of that number, over 6,000 women. So it's just horrific, Arlen. It just keeps getting worse, of course, every day. Israel just invaded. They've occupied Gaza, so it's hard for me to see what they mean by invading. But they just send in the tanks to, I guess, I mean, what are they doing? Do you even have any idea what this is about? What they're doing in Gaza right now?
There certainly does seem they're just trying to drive all the Palestinians out of there, or at least put them in the tiny little corner so they could have the rest of, Palestine for themselves. That's what it seems like. But I think the big news today regarding Gaza and Israel is that the United Nations, one of their important committees, called what Netanyahu and Israel are doing genocide. I mean, they put that word out there and said this is genocide, which they hadn't done before. So, that's significant.
Yeah. No, it is something. It had been bandied about in various UN committees and commissions studying the issue, and now they've come to that conclusion. You can see here Israeli troops push into Gaza City, forcing desperate Palestinians to flee. They have nowhere to go. during World War II, when American troops would capture German villages, they actually would give out food. They would actually try to help the people there. That's not what the Israelis have been doing. They have, wherever they are, they leave a trail of destruction and death behind for the civilians. Not just it's hard to even know who the combatants are. Really, they claim they're after Hamas, but then they say anybody who's over 17 and is a man is a combatant.
Yeah, everything that Israel is doing is inhumane. It's been that way for a long time, and I wish our country would say something or do something, but we're not. And eventually, who knows, maybe the international courts will have something to say about this. But at the moment, as long as Trump's in there, Netanyahu doesn't have to worry about being sent to an international criminal court.
It would seem you're correct. And we don't know what, can't prove a contra. We don't know what have happened if Harris had won the election. But you see here, Rubio, time is running out for a Gaza deal. Not unclear what that means. I guess he's recognizing that the final solution is fully being implemented. And, if all the Gazans, all the Palestinians there are killed, then there's obviously no deal. This is destroying, it's morally destroying us as a country, and I think much of the world as well, Arlen. It's the most heartbreaking thing for me that our country has done. And again, I hate to keep defending myself against people who are angry about my post on Charlie Kirk, but again, if you're going to defend Israel, I'm just simply not going to be able to see your full humanity. I just think part of being a human means you show concern for people who are just totally being persecuted, oppressed, and ultimately killed. Israel hits UNRWA buildings, Gaza, 4 schools, clinics.
Goes on and on.
Yeah.
And you know what I think of, Hal, when we're talking about this is very early in this, well, at least a few months ago, Donald Trump was talking about, hey, if we go into Palestine, we could make it a beautiful place and something like Atlantic City or something like that, make resorts and, totally unrealistic, and nobody really took him seriously, but that's what he believes in. And who knows, that might have something to do with what's going on right now and what Netanyahu has decided to do.
You think that Trump's remarks about like this Mediterranean resort, how valuable the land is and all that, I mean, it's possible, although this certainly seems to be part of his plan, Netanyahu's plan.
And whatever Trump wants, he tells people, and he usually gets what he wants. I mean, he thinks he's thinking that he is now the king, certainly appears to be a dictator. So, that could be a factor here. If no one's going to go against, no one wants to go against Trump. So no one has the power to go against Trump. So I wonder if that's, part of what's going on, that Trump seems to think that maybe, he can do something with the land in Gaza.
Well, the killing of Charlie Kirk actually caused Republicans to rally around Trump, which is, a very obviously unfortunate aspect of this, because you have people, and we talked about, I think, Marjorie Taylor Greene last week, and how, at least you said too, we had a grudging respect for her because she was standing up to her president, her party's president. And since then, she has really embraced Kirk and dropped her talk. As far as I can tell, there's no more talk about the Epstein files. There's no more talk about the genocide in Gaza. She's joined the outcry against liberals and the left for supposedly killing Kirk. And again, we have I know that's what the governor, he sort of alluded to, this alleged boyfriend of Tyler Robinson, who's the arrested for the killing. The governor of Utah said that he used the word boyfriend, who was transitioning. He had been activated online. He was pressed on that, activated online by the left. At one point, I didn't play this video, but Dana Bash from CNN pushed him. Well, what's your evidence for that? Well, and he didn't really have any, or at least if he had, he didn't cite it. The FBI has not, as far as and I have a quote from CBS, and we'll show it in a second. But yeah, so there it is, what you mentioned, though. Just Israel has committed genocide in Gaza. And that's what we should be talking about. How do we unite against it? Which, by the way, that's what Marjorie Taylor Greene was talking about a week ago, but she isn't now, as far as I can tell. And she certainly has come out hard against the left. And I got a very upsetting quote from her as well, we'll share. But here's the evidence for the genocide. Nearly 65,000. These figures are considered reliable by the UN. Almost certainly they're way too low. Most of the population has been repeatedly displaced. 90% of the homes are estimated to be damaged or destroyed. Healthcare, water, sanitation, and hygiene have all collapsed. And there's famine as well in the main population center there, Gaza City. So sure does sound like a genocide. The plan to and putting into effect the actual destruction, the complete destruction of an entire group of people. It seems like that's what Israel's doing.
It sure sounds like it, and the UN is starting to recognize that, and I think it's pretty much undeniable.
Arlen, just to get to continue with the Kirk story, and we're going to get to your post in the bigpicturereport.com. This is from CBS News late last night. Charlie Kirk killing, suspect had obsession with a conservative influencer, FBI says. Now, remember, Kash Patel is actually the head of the FBI, and he has implied, I believe, that, or he's reposted tweets from people saying that there was some sort of left-wing conspiracy to kill him, or the left activated the killer. But that's not what the FBI is saying itself. It's not with the statements of the FBI. According to ABC News, what they know now is Robinson was arrested. He had an obsession with Kirk. And according to ABC here, they're assessing all the evidence, including looking at electronic devices, federal that he had access to. A motive has not been revealed by officials. So the FBI does not know. So the claim that this was somehow some left-wing agenda item, or that he was activated by some sort of violent rhetoric on the left, to date, there's no evidence that has been adduced, or at least the officials investigating do not say that.
Well, from the very beginning, Donald Trump has been blaming the left wing for all of this, without any proof or evidence. And, that's just what he does, and people like to follow whatever he says. So, yeah, it's gotten way out of hand. Personally, I don't care that much about the background of the shooter. I mean, there are crazy people, there are nuts out there who like to shoot guns, and, they come from all walks of life. And, he was just a nut, I think, and, mentally ill. And I don't think you should blame an entire, group of people for what he did.
Well, I agree 100%. What we should be taking away from this is we have far too many guns. It's far too easy to get them. They're far too powerful. We need to be much more aggressive about about background checks, about licensing. We have to be going back to people who we maybe granted a license 2 years ago, go back and check them out. Are they still stable? What are their obsessions, if they have any? We need to do so much more when it comes to keeping these lethal weapons out of people's hands. And that seems to me the most obvious takeaway. The other kind of, I guess you want to talk, we'll talk about, go ahead. Yeah. Go ahead, Arlen.
Yeah, just a moment. Before you get off the gun topic, Charles Kirk was one who had a lot to say about guns. And one of the things he said was, it's worth the cost of all these people dying who are killed by guns because we need the Second Amendment. So, it's more important, which is I think it was a pretty awful way to think, but that's the way he was talking about gun control. He said it's not worth it.
Yeah, he did, and I'll respond a little bit more on that in a second. But I do want to remind you, please click subscribe if you haven't yet done so. Bottom right of your screen makes a huge difference. Click like, and also I will even still, under the circumstances, fraught though they may be, urge you to check us out on Facebook at the Facebook group Halitics. I think it's worth a look and a comment, and I love the comments as long as they're civil. Express whatever view you want, as long as you're not making personal slights, personal attacks, or just diminishing or demeaning people on the page. And I also ask you to, definitely be careful about your rhetoric and ascribing motives that you don't like to people. But we try to be willing to let various opinions be presented, but I'm also more and more cognizant of trying to keep it a safe space, a safe place for everybody. It's very, very important to me because again, I want us to address these problems, Arlen, and we can't do that if we're name calling and attacking each other and insulting each other.
Yeah, and that seems to be something that's going on all the time, way too much, and it's getting worse on social media. And your Facebook page on Halitics should be about, hey, this is my idea. If you don't agree with it, tell me why. Give me some evidence. But apparently that's not, what's going on. People are starting to make it more and more personal and attacking more and more. And that is really bad for, normal debate and for democracy.
Well, and again, I do take some of the blame, and I have a lot of remorse for inflaming a situation. I think that's where our friend Splash Ken Berger is as well. A little bit of remorse for some comments he made on another program. Arlen, let's go to the big picture report. We don't always have Arlen original material to share, but we do today. Not yet ready for Mount Rushmore. So tell us about who is not ready for Mount Rushmore and why you posted this article.
Well, yeah, I was very disturbed at the way things were going when people were talking about, oh, shoot. Sorry about that. I was just very upset about the way things were going and that people were starting to ascribe almost godlike attributes to Charles Kirk. I mean, he was not a great human being. He probably had a lot of positive traits, but he was also somebody who had also said a lot of very negative, very hateful, very bigoted things in the past, and people are pretty much ignoring those things. And I felt it was necessary that, to bring those out to show that he's less than perfect and he's not ready for Mount Rushmore. He's not the great godlike figure that a lot of people want him to be or are trying to say that he is. And, it was just getting out of hand. And, of course, he was a friend of the Trump family, so that was one part of it. But, he was a influencer, a commentator, but nothing as great as people are trying to ascribe to him. He had his faults. He had he said good things and he said bad things, and the bad things need to be.
You identify here as a casualty of this, I guess, rush to lionize Charlie Kirk. Matt Dowd, who had been a contributor to MSNBC, previously at ABC News, and I believe worked for George W. Bush. Dowd was fired because he speculated whether there had been maybe somebody had fired a gun at one of the Kirk events, and Kirk had been accidentally hit rather than targeted, because he didn't know. He had only heard that there had been a shooting and that Kirk had been hit. He didn't know that it had been that it was an assassination. So he speculated as to that as a possibility, and then he noted that words have consequences and that Kirk's words could lead. He didn't say that, but he did say, hey, words have consequences and our rhetoric is can be problematic. I'm not quoting him exactly. Do you have the exact quote? We should really try to get the exact quote here, Arlen.
I don't have it in front of me, but I certainly was disturbed by all of this because, for somebody to get fired he didn't really say anything that negative about Kirk. He didn't, inflame anything. He just made some reasonable comments that, hey, if you talk like that, if you stir people up, sometimes violence happens. So the way they were talking about it on MSNBC, the president there was just berating him and calling him all, saying all kind of awful things about him, and which shouldn't have been done. He deserves to still be working, as opposed to Brian Kilmeade on Fox and Friends over at Fox News, who literally said the government should be killing homeless people, and yet, he apologized about 4 days later, and he's still working as far as I know. So,
well, he said, I believe what he said in response to another commentator's point, that homeless or that mentally ill people who refuse their meds should be incarcerated. And then he said, or given a lethal injection. And yeah, that was incredibly insensitive. I mean, it was in the context of a conversation about the killer of this woman, this Ukrainian woman, Irina, a horrible crime. And, we talk about learning from and hopefully not repeating what happened to Charlie Kirk, using sane gun laws, replacing our basically, open carry country to one where you're vetted before you can have a gun. And we also limit the types of firearms available to people. That's what we should do. We would have far fewer deaths. Likewise, we do have a huge mental health issue here. We don't spend nearly enough to protect people from those who could be violent when they're mentally ill. We don't provide services for mentally ill people. And it is true, I believe, that these institutions will let folks out who are perhaps a danger because they don't have the resources to take care of them. So we should have a national conversation about how to protect people. But that doesn't mean we put toxins in their arms if they are resistant to taking their medication. But yeah, it does mean that they should be involuntarily committed to institutions if they refuse to take meds that are necessary to prevent them from becoming violent.
I don't remember anybody saying such a thing, as, people should be put to death for being homeless. I've never heard of anything like that on the media. And it was really horrendous. And yet he kind of got away with it for a few days until it was noticed. And then he started to apologize for it. But, he's still working. He's still on Fox and Friends, and, like nothing happened.
Well, Dowd didn't even say anything really inappropriate as far as I can tell. I don't even know what Dowd said that anyone would say was wrong. People have been gotten doxxed and I think fired for quoting Charlie Kirk's words, like his words about especially having guns, the Second Amendment, having a few deaths is the price we pay for a free society, when in fact the easy access to firearms is a big reason we're not particularly free, why people feel unsafe, and a feeling of freedom means you can go out into the public square without fear of getting shot. So it seems to me we've lost freedoms because of our pro-gun maker laws. No question about that, in my view. So I think Kirk was wrong there. But the issue, go ahead. I'm sorry, Arlen. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's okay. No, the problem here is that when Kirk got shot, all of a sudden everything became, extreme, and they started saying all the wonderful things about him, and Trump started saying it was all the Democrats and liberals' fault, and it just got to be ridiculous, and that's why I thought it was necessary to show the contrast between those two commentators.
Well, I mentioned that there have been people who've lost their jobs. I believe I've heard that just quoting Charlie Kirk on the Second Amendment was sufficient for some people to lose their jobs. And I was comparing that to Dr. Martin Luther King and his assassination. His words were endlessly quoted after his death to show what a wonderful person he was, how great he was, what a treasure we lost, what a one of the greatest people ever, a true freedom fighter. We lost him, and his words prove that. They prove the monstrosity of the act that was committed by Ray, by I guess James Earl Ray, who killed him.
Yeah.
If somebody has done good, if somebody's life work is to free people, to make life a little better for poor, struggling, and working people, then I don't think anybody's going to object to quoting them after they die or after they're killed. It's only when somebody's rhetoric is, again, divisive, pits people against each other who really need to unite, who puts their own interests ahead of everybody else's. That's when it becomes problematic if you quote them, at least to their supporters.
Yeah, Matthew Dowd was fired very early, and he knew exactly why he was fired, because he said MSNBC got scared. They were, that they folded to possible pressure from the Trump administration, because that's the way it is these days. Major media networks are afraid that Donald Trump will do something, like he's talking about a $15 billion lawsuit against the New York Times, so they're scared. And he knew he was fired because of that fear.
So we talked about device and division, and how Kirk's the killing of Kirk, the slaying of Kirk, makes it harder for us to address the serious problems that we face. And this from Marjorie Taylor Greene, I think, backs up what I was saying earlier. Greene renewed her call for a national divorce to divide the country along partisan lines Monday, this time saying the fractured response to the assassination of conservative activist Kirk and federal funding disputes in Congress. There's nothing left to talk about with the left. They hate us, Greene wrote on the social platform X. To be honest, I want a peaceful national divorce. Our country is too far gone and too far divided. It's no longer safe for any of us, she added. So I think spin this in the best light for Greene, there is a lot of hate on both sides. And I've talked to people, and they'll tell me, yeah, I hate Trump. I mean, they'll say that. I won't say that. I use language that was very, as I keep, I'll never stop, beating myself up. I use really very aggressive language against Kirk. I'm sorry about that. I don't know that I would say, in some ways I find Kirk to be just a really, really problematic, because I think he enriched himself by dividing people. And that very, very much upsets me. That really pisses me off. Just like the stories we talked about, the leftist influencers or progressive influencers who are taking money, to soft sell certain messages. Really, that pushes my buttons. I think this is so just disappointing from Greene. She was working with Ro Khanna on some sort of ceasefire language. She was working with the Democrats on trying to get the Epstein files released. So for her to say there's nothing left to talk about with the left is very, very dispiriting.
Well, Hal, what's different between those on the right, people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, and yourself is you've apologized a number of times for what you said, and you take it back. They never do take it back. They stick with it, and they make it even worse. And that's the difference.
Well, Kilmeade did. To be fair, Kilmeade did apologize for what he said.
4 days later. Yeah, 4 days later.
It's interesting that Taylor Greene projects the hatred she apparently feels towards the left, or felt on the left towards her. Here, Taylor Greene confronted over old social media posts advocating violence against Democrats. And indeed, she did, Arlen, calling. Now, some might say, well, she didn't really advocate violence. I think this is pretty close, if not outright advocation of violence against Nancy Pelosi. She's a traitor to our country. She is guilty of treason, Greene says in the 2019 video, which she posted on Facebook at the time. She took an oath to protect American citizens. It's a crime punishable by death. I mean, that's pretty strong.
Yeah, and because of her words, somebody went into her home and attacked her husband with a hammer, although the person was looking for Nancy Pelosi. And, he's got some very serious head injuries. And, that just should never happen in this country.
All right, Arlen, 240-242-5646. If folks want to join us, 240-242-5646. Yeah, I don't know why I put that Meet the Press clip. I don't want to play that right now, but do you want to talk a little more about your piece? And then we can get to some others as well that you had recommended, but not yet ready for Mount Rushmore, which is, by the way, at thebigpicturereport.com. And you can see Arlen's website is right there on your screen.
Well, thank you, Hal, for mentioning that. Things were just getting completely out of hand, and I felt it needed to be, we need to sober up a little bit and understand there are two sides to this, and it's not just the left that's doing all the bad things, which apparently Donald Trump seems to think that, and which is, it's terrible. The President of the United States should try to bring us together, but instead he's doing the complete opposite. He's trying to divide us.
Well, there's the claim that only the left does it, right? That the left is really the violent ones, and all the evidence flies in the face of that. Studies have shown there are far more violent acts, terroristic acts in the United States that can be attributed to right-wing groups and right-wing activation than left. And I want to just show this real quick before we go. I was debating whether to put this up, but in terms of how to have what I believe a civil dialogue with people who you disagree with. So on Halitics, this post came up there. Vance, I was pointing out that the Minnesota lawmaker who was killed earlier this year, Melissa Hortman, was killed by a right-wing shooter, and this fact is being complete, and that was determined, right? That this was somebody who was angry about gun laws and angry about trans athletes, apparently, in Minnesota sports. I don't think they should have, trans girls should be competing in high school sports either. That doesn't make it okay to kill a lawmaker. So the response was that the killer, Vance Bolger, was a left-wing nut job, and then Trump put the flag at half-mast to honor Hortman. Everyone disavowed Paul's attacker. So I responded. I didn't get into it. I didn't insult. I didn't attack. I just said, hey, here's your video. Trump defends not lowering flags. So he didn't. Yep. You said he did? No, he didn't. Vance Bolger was a Republican. He wasn't a left-wing nut job by any means. He was a Republican in the last election. I didn't respond to the Pelosi comment there about Paul Pelosi. But the fact is, Charlie Kirk asked for a patriot to bail out his attacker. Charlie Kirk said that we should bail out his attacker. It doesn't sound like doesn't sound like a condemnation of the attack.
Yeah, words are flying all over the place, and they're very harmful and very extreme. And, what we're seeing is something that cannot continue to go on, or this country will, lose any semblance of democracy if it hasn't already. And, freedom of speech will be sort of gone.
I don't want to attack. I want to be real clear here. I do not want to attack Kirk's followers. I was frustrated that they follow him, but I'm really, I don't know what to do, Arlen, because there are millions and millions of Americans who see things differently than we do. I think there are areas where we agree. I think that if the Democrats we could unite behind candidates who support Medicare for all, higher taxes on the rich, we could win elections and make this country a better place. But right now, if we don't even talk to each other, I don't know how we do that.
Yeah, and I think there's some manipulation going on too. There's the people, the forces on the right are trying to really push the message that it's the left-wing Democrats that are doing all these terrible things, and we should do something about it. And people seem to be responding to that, unfortunately, because they probably listen to Fox News and copycat media sources like that, and that they will be supported if they feel the enemy is only the left.
Arlen, you wanted to talk. I'm going to put this up here now. Your favorite columnist is, at least as determined by the number of columns that you recommend we discuss, by by him, Nicholas Kristof of the New York Times. So why did you want to talk about Parkinson's? I guess that's a disease, right, where your body loses some control over your extremities at first, and you shake, and it's often fatal. Why did this piece speak to you?
Well, for one thing, I do know several people who do have Parkinson's disease, and what Kristof is saying is that there's very good evidence that it comes from pollution from some of the pesticides and things that are used every day, and countries in Europe have banned many of them. I think one of the big ones was what was it?
Well, Japan, Switzerland, they don't allow it. The company that I think makes it's called Syngenta. Is that right, Arlen? Syngenta?
Yeah, paraquat was what I was looking for. And
yeah. That's the chemical itself. It's a pesticide, yeah.
Yeah. And then there's so many others. And I think one of the points that Kristof is making is that you have all this evidence, and yet he doesn't, the companies don't want to stop making those things, or government doesn't want to ban those chemicals because, hey, they're profitable. But in the meantime, Parkinson's disease and many other diseases are just getting worse and affecting more and more people. So you have to ask, what's more important, profits or people?
It was really interesting because, and I have a quote there about how many folks hoped that RFK Jr. would take on the pesticide companies. I believe before he went into the Trump administration, he, as much as having been an anti-vaxxer, was also quite critical of pesticides and other toxic, other chemicals in our environment. He had worked to clean up the Hudson, for example, as an environmental lawyer. And yet you're hearing very little, if anything, from his Health and Human Services in response to pesticides, in response to these toxins in our system. And I'm wondering, Arlen, do you think this is an area? We saw many on the right break with the Trump administration when it comes to both the Epstein files and their support for Israel, which unfortunately we're seeing that break seemingly healed over in the wake of the Kirk killing. Is this an area where we can pry some of the MAGA supporters or some of the Republican voters away from Trump and RFK by pointing out that he's a hypocrite, RFK Jr., for failing to take on pesticide companies?
Well, apparently not yet. I mean, they're not. Nobody's talking about. Well, nobody important is talking about getting rid of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Some of the Republicans, as well as Democrats, gave him a lot of criticism when he testified about, last week or whenever it was. But, right now he seems to be going for the vaccinations and how terrible they are, and kind of ignoring, these kind of issues of pollutants and pesticides and so on. And that may come from the top. I don't know. Maybe Trump says, hey, don't go after my friends. They're doing the best they can. We're not sure that, these chemicals are the cause, and they're, making so much money. Why don't we hold off on that? And that is very bad.
Well, it's interesting that they're taking this very measured approach with respect to these pesticides, which we absolutely know kill lots of things. Maybe they aren't responsible for these diseases or for, increases in, say, Parkinson's, but we definitely know that they're fatal in many applications. But at the same time, with, at best, arguably suggestive evidence that some vaccines may in certain cases be slightly risky, they ban them, or they say, no, we're not going to require them. We're going to tell people they don't have to take them. So despite very equivocal evidence, RFK Jr. is perfectly prepared to, remove mandates to use vaccines. But with strong, if not conclusive evidence, he will not ban pesticides.
Yeah, I think, the New York Times had an editorial, I wonder if you can find it right away, about Of course, I can't find
Let
it.
me just see if
About
I can.
how much they got, Kennedy and all that have made our health so much worse because, with things that Robert F. Kennedy is doing, with all the cuts in research and cuts in funding of things that have been proven to be helpful to people's health, there's going to be a lot more deaths because of all these things. And then, Robert F. Kennedy has to take some responsibility for it, as well as Congress.
And Trump but they don't. So what do you and I disagree on one thing that you've said. You often say is that there's really nobody who has power to stand up to Trump. And legally there's truth to that. The courts can, and sometimes they've said no to him, but basically they're the only ones. Congress has failed to do that. Where I think we disagree is that I do believe that the Democrats have far more power than they're willing to use in many ways, especially in terms of the power of the bully pulpit, especially in terms of rallying people, coming forward with truly positive, pro-people policies as alternatives. And I don't think they've done that. We saw that with Hakeem Jeffries even saying, well, there's nothing we can do. So I don't think that it's completely accurate. But at this point, what I think they need to do, again, and we don't see it, you do see the Republicans, in some ways they're very united, in other ways they're fissures. The Democrats need to agree on a set of popular policies and keep pushing them and just keep talking about them, including, I think, getting, including addressing these toxic substances in our air, in our water, in our, all around us.
And I think in the last week or so, we've also talked about that there is one thing the Democrats can do, and that is stop funding the government, just put a halt to all the funding, which would make the Republicans have to deal with the Democrats, maybe, make some deals that would be really helpful and give a lot of chance for Democrats to show what their issues are and what's really important. And it's a great opportunity, and I hope they take advantage of it. When they had that chance before, Chuck Schumer decided not to do that and got criticized a lot for it. But I think, now has to be the time. And one more thing, too, I think not only the Democrats, but also you have to worry about the mass media, that they're afraid of, Trump and getting in trouble for what they say. And I think that's a factor here. Like I say, suing the New York Times for $15 billion and Rupert Murdoch and the Wall Street Journal for $10 billion. I mean, this has an effect, and it's really shuts down coverage.
100%, Arlen. All right, let's talk about uniting on the left. Do you think this? What do you, if anything, take in? I don't think I discussed this yesterday with. By the way, we had Carlos Charles yesterday. We did discuss this. Although I don't know if I put this essay up. Great show, but I really enjoy talking to Carlos. He's always a really top notch, just like Arlen is, brings a lot of really interesting dialogue to the table. What do you think about this? So Governor Hochul, who in this editorial she wrote for the New York Times, or they call it a guest essay, I guess, talks about her very significant differences with Mamdani, but nevertheless, her endorsement of him. What do you think? Are you happy about that? Do you think it's important? How much help, if any, will that provide Mamdani? And does this bespeak a more unified Democratic Party moving forward?
I think it's really important, and I have a lot of respect for her for being able to do this, because many Democrats are not able to agree with her on that, and they're afraid to endorse Mamdani. People like Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries and a lot of establishment Democrats are just afraid, thinking that, he's too left-wing, too socialist, and it'll hurt the party. But no, I think he's just what the Democratic Party needs, somebody that they could rally around and make some real progressive issues come to the fore.
Well, Carlos made the point yesterday, and I didn't have the essay in front of me, that Hochul was doing it at least as much for herself as for for Mamdani, that she has a tough race next year, I believe, for governor. She's going to be challenged. And, she wants to protect her left flank. So this is a way for her to do that. And I have no problem with that. Yeah, you should be moving left, Governor Hochul. If that's what it takes to move you that way, a challenge from the right, then good. Then that's fine. The other point we've heard from many, I think Bernie said this, is the reason you don't have more Democratic leaders endorsing Mamdani is because of pressure from their donors. And I believe it was Jacobin Mag wrote, that's a synonym for corruption. And I agree. It's one thing if you are afraid because the voters have a very strong feeling about an issue or policy and you need to support it to earn their votes. That's one thing. It's another if you just want to get more money into your coffers from one or two big Wall Street investors.
And I think that's a factor in the Democrats' poor performance in the election. People could see that they were still, relying on the donations from big corporations and billionaires. And even though Republicans were certainly doing the same thing, Donald Trump had a way of talking like he was different than everybody else. And, he was going to weed out all the corruption and all this and that, which he isn't. He's made things worse, but he had a way of getting people to believe him.
I think, honestly, the reason Trump prevails when he does, at least in elections, is because he certainly presents himself as different than the others. And to some degree, I guess he is. People are so disgusted with business as usual politics. And because it's hurt them, because our country is really, in many ways, gone downhill. We're pursuing bad policies. People are working harder for less, to stay in the same place. They do not envision a happy life or a happy future for their kids. And neither party offers them any alternative.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Hal. A lot of people are going to be hurting even more as the jobs start drifting away and manufacturing jobs disappear and inflation will probably continue to rise. I mean, there's going to be people who will be, in very bad shape. And of course, because the big, beautiful bill has taken away a lot of health care and Medicaid and, food stamps and things like that, there's going to be a lot more hurt. And I hope the Democrats will somehow take advantage of that.
Well, I hope that they take advantage of it by sincerely calling for demanding better policies rather than just trying to use them as a campaign issue that they ultimately are prepared to forsake as soon as they take office. That's what I think people fear.
Well, like I'm saying, if they have to make a deal, if the Democrats decide not to fund the government, that's one way that they can bring that to people's attention that, hey, we want to make a deal. We want to give better things for working people, better things, give unions a better opportunity and all these other issues. They have to get people to pay attention to what they want to say. You had one other story, Arlen, you recommended. We have a few more minutes, and this really kind of ties things together a little bit. And that is the internet, the role of, I guess, new media, electronic media. Yesterday with Carlos, we talked about how bad data centers are in terms of the, consumption of energy and, the control that big tech has over now our energy grid. The internet is also obviously a problem for our minds as well as our environment here. Charlie Kirk's Killing and Our Poisonous Internet by Nathan Taylor Pemberton. You want to tie everything together with this article? Well, I was thinking, I've been writing letters to the editor for decades now. And the thing I liked about that in the newspaper, there's your name, there's your city, you're responsible for what you say. But nowadays, you can just make up a name, or, nobody knows who you are or where you come from, anything like that. So you can say anything you want. And that gives a lot of freedom to people who want to say a lot of hateful things. And there certainly is an increase in hateful things. I think there's no doubt about it. And, truth and reality seem to be less important on the internet now, especially when you got AI, where people can really, make a good effort to, obscure reality. Then, it's going to be hard to know what is factual and what is real.
I agree. I'm trying to know where to go with that. It's a very dispiriting thought. It's a very unhappy thought, because we really just we have our own realities. I spoke with one of our conservative Halitics members last week, and he said, we're watching different we're watching different news shows. We're getting information from different places, and we have very different realities, right? They have their reality, or you have your reality, and we have a different reality. And I don't know how to breach that. I don't know how to I guess, breach, again, is the right word, I guess, that divide. I have that trouble with the left too, or I guess progressives, liberals, whatever, because I see people like Harris and Biden as a huge part of the problem too, and many on the left, or at least, to the left of center, don't, and they have big problems with it when I point that out. So I don't know what to do, Arlen.
Yeah, at one point many years ago, when Walter Cronkite was giving the news, and Huntley and Berkeley and all that, there was a general consensus among people in the United States, and they just, they would decide as a nation maybe that this Vietnam War may not be that good, and civil rights might be okay, but now you've got people making money off stirring up people, presenting news that is, stirs people up. It causes hate, and they give out false information, and nobody seems to care that much about it. So I think our media is in a lot of bad shape right now, and I don't know what the answer is either, but we definitely need an answer.
Well, this is a big reason why you have folks like, the rise of people like Charlie Kirk, because people understandably don't trust the New York Times. I know you and I'll disagree. I think you can trust the facts in the New York Times as far as they go, more than just about anywhere else. But still, they ran an editorial claiming you should vote for Andrew Cuomo, not Mamdani. They have repeatedly used language that minimizes what Israel's doing. So all media is clearly suspect to one degree or another. And I think it's because it's captive. And the Times is the best of the bunch, right? I mean, I'm pointing out probably the gold star media, in my opinion, is problematic at best. So you really can understand why people will just gravitate to anything that seems to speak to them and speaks authoritatively. Maybe they like the look of the person making the statement, or they say something that just strikes them as accurate, and then they buy into the narrative. It's very, very problematic.
I think part of the reason is people are able to say or think terrible things, be prejudiced, and yet and these media sources will confirm what they say. Hey, you're right. This minority group or these immigrants are ruining our country, and you're absolutely right about that, and something should be done. But it may not. There's not necessarily truth in that, but that's what they hear, and that's what people want to hear. They want to have their views confirmed and endorsed.
Except, I agree with that, except that the view that the real problems in our society stem largely from concentration of wealth and power in the hands of a few billionaires, that view is not allowed. to be shared in any of the corporate or mainstream media. I don't even think the New York Times really talks about that. Maybe I missed it, but they rarely talk about wealth concentration.
You're right. A lot of things are off the table that used to be on the table, and that's one of them. Yeah. The inequality in this country keeps getting worse and worse, but nobody seems to be talking about it.
All right, Arlen, before I let you go, we have gone an hour. Now, you had another story, which I didn't put up there, but if you want to talk a little bit about it, go ahead. I don't even remember which one it was at this point.
No, I think we covered all my stories.
Did we? Okay, good. Then I'm glad. Did we cover them completely to your satisfaction, at least?
I think so. Yeah, definitely. So, there's so much going on in this country, and if we pick a few things and cover them well, I think we're doing good.
Yeah, I just showed for a second there, it was sort of like one of those what do they call it? Subconscious memes that you put in people's minds, but that was shared. Guns don't murder people, Democrats do. And I just, again, that pithy statement that just will stick in people's minds, I probably shouldn't have repeated it, was, used to, in part in reaction to the arrest of Tyler Robinson. Tyler Robinson isn't a Democrat. He is not registered voter, period. You can't, maybe he voted, I don't know. We don't know who he voted for, Harris, maybe, but he's not a Democrat. The guy we mentioned before in Minnesota was a Republican, the killer in Minnesota. The guy who shot at Trump in Pennsylvania was actually, I believe, a Republican registered voter. So this idea that it's Democrats just is false. And I really want to make that point one more time. This is so, I mean, in a way, as Arlen points out, whoever the killers are, whatever their political identity, the real answer is to come up with a solution. The solution, in my view, a very important one, is to restrict gun availability. But if you're going to throw out there the claim that Democrats are somehow responsible, that just flies in the face of reality. This guy, Bolter, was a registered Republican. David Carlson, who was the guy who shot at Trump in Pennsylvania, was a registered Republican. So again, so look, we got to be honest. We got to tell the truth here. If you want to say it's Democrats, then come with the receipts. The receipts say just the opposite.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, the words you were looking for, I think, were subliminal advertising. Could that be it?
Yes. And I even want to give you one more person. This guy, Crooks, Thomas Crooks, I believe. Carlson. Bolter is the one who was the shooter in Minnesota. The guy who shot at Trump in Pennsylvania was Thomas Crooks. Thomas Crooks was a Republican registered voter. There you go. You can see Thomas Crooks. He'd been registered to vote in Pennsylvania since 21, and he registered as a Republican.
Yeah, and for Donald Trump, blaming the left and blaming liberals and blaming Democrats is absurd because, he was being targeted by a
Republican. Yeah. And it's understandable that you could see that because a lot of the policies that Trump espoused aren't particularly congenial to Republican elites.
Well, yeah, it's certainly a different kind of Republican Party than it used to be.
The tariffs, for example, cost some importers a lot of money. The war on immigrants is problematic for labor exploiters who hire them off the books at $5 an hour. So I'm not saying they care about the immigrants, but they exploit them and profit from them, and having them rounded up in the streets and shipped off to Alligator, Alcatraz, or wherever he sends them doesn't profit them. So they have a problem with it.
Yeah.
All right. Final word, Arlen. Anything else?
Yes, actually, there is. It seems like Donald Trump bombed another boat out in international waters near Venezuela, claiming that they were, drug smugglers. Again, there's no proof. We have no evidence, but he feels he could just do that whenever he wants, which is against international law, and it's very, very sad.
Anybody killed? Do we know? Probably, right?
Three. I saw it on the news. The boat was coming along. There were 3 people in it, and then boom, it was gone.
I didn't realize they had just been completely vaporized. It's horrible.
That's what they do.
All right, Arlen, thanks for your time. As always, thanks for the important, interesting, and scintillating conversation. I'll see you Tuesday, a week from today, for another Arlen Tuesday. And I, Hal, will be back tomorrow for yet another Halitics.